Welcome back, friends, to our podcast, A Call to Justice. I'm here today with some friends of mine who are working in Catholic education today, and we're really excited to have this opportunity to interview, hear from them, and learn more about how young adults are giving witness and working with young people today in the church. Before we begin our podcast today, just as a reminder, the opinions and thoughts expressed in this evergreen section of our website reflect only the presenter's views and not necessarily those of Mercy Conference and Retreat Center, its board, staff, or sponsor, the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas, nor does the mere appearance of content on this site constitute an endorsement. All right, and with that being said, I want to welcome all of you, all of our friends who are listening and watching today. We have my friends Evan Bednars, Josh Ostertag, and Nick Uxa, who are all working in Catholic education in some capacity and form. And I want to give them a chance to be able to share a little bit about themselves and, their work and the things that they're doing to bring the church to people. Evan, if you want to start us off, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Again, my name is Evan Bednars. I am based in El Paso, Texas. Yeah, on the border of Texas and Mexico. So I'm working at the all boys Catholic school, Cathedral High School, which is associated with the cathedral here in El Paso. I teach sophomore religion to boys, so New Testament and church history. Um, Very unique. So this is my first year. So first year is always kind of trial by fire, but it's also incredibly bilingual environment. So we have probably 30% of students are crossing the border from Juarez across the Rio Grande to go to high school here. So it's a very unique cultural situation at Cathedral. But yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you, Evan. No, that's incredible. It sounds like a really interesting ministry for you for sure. Josh, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Josh Ostertag. I am currently residing in Northern Kentucky. I am a campus minister at Thomas More University. I've been there for about 9 months. Mostly what I do is we have a scholarship program for campus ministry, and so I recruit for that. So visiting mostly local high schools. It's a regional university mostly. We're not pulling like a national population typically. And then also I coordinate that scholarship program, which is mostly like being the supervisor and I guess mentor, leader of student leaders who are mostly of our programming and events are student led. And so I'm kind of, I guess, guiding them to do ministry on campus.
No, that's great. Thank you for that. And I don't think I mentioned this in the beginning of my introduction, but for our audience who's listening, um, these all of these young men here have studied with me at Aquinas Institute of Theology, in some capacity or form in classes or even just walking down the halls and seeing each other. So we know each other a little bit and know our dynamics just for your awareness. And Nick, if you want to go ahead and close us out on the intros.
Yeah, so my name's Nick Uxa, and I'm based out of my home here in St. Louis. I am currently in my first year teaching at Koryezu Academy. So that is an all-girls school here in St. Louis. It's a ministry of the Apostles of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, one religious order, obviously, who still run the place. And this year I'm currently teaching senior theology. It's my first year teaching that. What that's kind of consisted of, it's been a kind of a mixed bag of multiple things. So like last year I did like faith and reason, faith and science. We also introduced Ignatian discernment to the semester. This semester is entirely different. We're currently finishing up Vatican II. We're going through the 4 major constitutions. And then for the last quarter, I kind of call it the senioritis section. It is dealing with world religions, so where there's not as much heavy stuff, but next year, I'm kind of in the process of redoing the curriculum. I might be teaching freshmen next year too, because currently I'm just teaching seniors because it's the biggest class. But next year, the biggest class is going to be the freshman class, so I'll probably be helping with them. So it's going to be a whole new bag of students, considering this. Seniors are a lot more independent, a lot more, they know what they're doing, when freshman's going to be definitely interesting new thing. I mean, definitely for me, I'm mostly still just in the teaching, obviously first year. So like Evan said, it's kind of open trial by fire, especially being the new person with the seniors who know everything that they're doing. And I'd say, I mean, I went to all guys school here in St. Louis, so it's definitely been a big kind of, you can almost say, culture shock, considering very different from my own high school experience. And, you know, I'm only one of the few guy teachers there, so it's definitely a very different ball game of, you know, being there, being a teacher there, being a minority, quote unquote minority there. But for the most part, it's been good. I love the school and everything.
That's you got a lot of dynamics working there, but it sounds very I think it's challenging, but it sounds like there's a lot of new growth you're getting as well in the experience from what I'm hearing. Which is great. I'm curious, before we dive into some questions and things, Nick and Josh, this is your first time doing like full-time ministry, is that right? For both of you?
Yeah.
That you're okay, gotcha. Okay, that's what I thought. And then Evan, how do you consider this experience? Is this your first time doing full-time ministry or?
Um, I mean, I guess well, no, because I was, 9 months with a Catholic worker. So I
Mhm.
guess I'd consider that more of also a trial by fire in a much different way. But yeah, I mean, every ministry is just so unique and particular. So it always feels like it's the first time.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Okay. No, this is going to be great then. I'm excited for the conversation. So I want to start, let's start positive. I think positivity is really important and we need that in our world more than anything. But I'm curious for you guys, what have been some of those positive values or some of the blessings that you think that you've kind of taken from your ministry, seeing it from the people or even for yourselves, what have been some of those things that have really been things that have stood out for you overall in your ministerial experience so far?
But, all right, I guess I'll not cutting anybody out.
Feel free.
Yeah, so again, just first year teaching, the job came to me very unexpectedly, so I didn't have a lot of um, you know, prep time, both, practically and even spiritually. So it's been incredibly challenging, but when you're in front of a classroom of, 15 to 25 boys and you're leading class, you're trying to convey some aspect of the faith that they can show up in a very consistent way, right? I can't just because they'll sniff you out if you're not prepared, if you're not believing what you're saying. So it forces you to show up in a very authentic way, day in and day out, which is, yeah, incredibly exhausting, but also um, the fruits of that have been really surprising to me. That it's forced me to be a type of person that I didn't think I was, but that I think it's forced me to integrate a lot of different aspects of myself that being a monk or being a Catholic worker or being a grad student didn't necessarily do. So
Yeah, thank you for that. That beam of authenticity, that's curious but interesting that that stands out for the boys. Yeah, very nice. Nick, how about you?
I mean, definitely it's mixed bag. Sometimes the girls can stress me out and then or they're stressing themselves out and feel bad for them. But at the same time, they can be a lot of fun to work with because, like I'm sure most teachers can say, they definitely enjoy having fun, just being goofy, as most teenagers are, and just, you know, making fun of each other, making fun of themselves. Also, just they very much enjoy being with the teachers, having the teachers, be part of it, especially working with the sisters. They enjoy it. And like her whole motto is, sharing the love of Christ. So trying to incorporate that every aspect of the school. So, and then, definitely when they're having fun, you have fun with them. Or when
Mm.
when things don't go right, like every morning they'll start with a called CJTV, Korezu television.
Mm.
And it's always fun when things don't go well on that with the either the transitions they have, and you can just make fun of it with the students later on in the day, or just other goofy stuff that happens throughout the day. They definitely be a joy to it that maybe other things don't, at least when things are going well. Like all teachers have good
Mm.
days and bad days.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, yeah. Joy. I find that when young people are in a joy-filled environment, it can make things a little bit easier for them transition-wise, and even for teachers too. It's better to be in a positive environment than in a toxic one, for sure. And Josh, how about you?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I was expecting from going to grad school to doing campus ministry at a university. Um, so I was in grad school. One of my major interests was the academic side of theology. And so I was kind of envisioning myself teaching, whether that's at a high school or potentially in a college or maybe potentially doing doctoral studies, and then going to ministry at a university where um, like the students for mostly just I guess for background, most of the students there would identify as some form of Christianity. So like 90% of them probably. And then maybe like 40% or 35% Catholic. Um, and then but it's mostly students are mostly studying like business, the hard sciences, education. It's not a university where people are studying philosophy, theology, history, English, anything like that. And so like the conversations that I've had aren't it's nothing to like when I was discussing things with fellow graduate students about, theological disputes or things like that. And honestly, I've had very little of that. But and I was expecting that, but it was still shocking, I guess. And so I find myself um basically trying to convey the faith in a more like casual setting of in the midst of conversations and not trying to like teach or instruct like overtly, but more of just like yeah, casually, where you can like mention things about, especially because they're really interested in the fact that I'm married and have a child, um, and I'm only 3 to 7 years older than most of them. And so a lot of what I try to instill in them is like, this could be you. Like you seniors, you're 22 years old. Like my wife is 22 years old. Like this could be you in very shortly. Um, and so that's one of the things that I think I find myself promoting the most is like really like an understanding of family life and um, anthropology is something that I think everyone's interested, at least implicitly.
Yeah, I laugh for a couple of reasons. One, I think to myself, I'm like, well, Josh hasn't presented his master's thesis to them. For context for our viewers, when Josh presented his master's thesis, I understood 5% of what he was saying. It was one of the smartest things I've ever heard. So when Josh mentioned the academic side of things, that completely connects for me. But I'm also like, I'm happy for you in a lot of ways too, because um it sounds like this ministry is having to kind of make you stretch in new ways or make you have to sort of practice new techniques, I guess, to kind of reach your audience. And I think you're in an interesting position compared to Evan and Nick because you're at a co-ed school, right? Like boys and girls are all going to the school versus you two, you guys have, single gender, which is really interesting to consider too. You're operating under um a different structure, I think, of school, but I'm glad to hear that at least you're learning those techniques, right? Like you're not getting stagnant in them. Um, and to me, the way you were describing it, the word that kept coming to mind for me was like pastoral accompaniment. It's almost this like Pope Francis model of like teaching is important. It's nothing to reduce from our educators and the role they play, but it's almost like in the lives of the young adults you're working with, they don't want that at that moment, or they're not looking for that at that moment. They're almost looking for kind of like you were saying, almost this anthropology. They're looking for someone to be there with them, to listen with them, and to, kind of support them on the journey, I think. Um, which is, yeah, that's fascinating to hear. For you guys, I'm curious then, we highlighted the positives. I'm curious, what have been some of the challenges, some of the difficulties or struggles that you've noticed in the lives of your students and the people you're working with? What are some of the things they're wrestling with in their daily lives that we may not be aware of?
Guess maybe we can go in order, I guess. So I think so part of I mean, teaching is just challenging. I totally underestimated, and I feel like I should email some of my high school teachers apologizing because for my contact back then, because it's definitely coming back around. But I think so, not having taught before, but also not, I'm 20 years older than my students, so meeting them where they are, I think that has been incredibly challenging in terms of not just where they are developmentally, psychologically, physically, but also, I mean, it's just such a different culture. I think culture changes so quickly and has changed so quickly. So, technology is a huge part. When I was in high school, we were using textbooks. Now we have iPads, we have, and now the kids where, they have their AirPods, like they're, it's part of them, right? It's part of their ear now. It's like this accessory. So I've tried to be very firm with that. And also understanding like what is, in a lot of ways, I think it's more difficult for them growing up just being bombarded by so much information and stimulation that they don't necessarily have the moral or intellectual resources to make sense of. So let's say, for TikTok, right? There's a whole bunch of garbage, but then there's, current events or political commentary. And so they're getting that, but then they're not, most of them are not at that stage in which to deconstruct that or interpret that or like what's going on here. So they just kind of like parrot it. They just kind of repeat it. And so to try to challenge that to help them, I mean, part of my job, I think, as a Catholic educator is to encourage them towards the truth, which means critical thinking, which means not necessarily believing the first thing that you hear just because it comes from some influencer that you like. So I think trying to give them the space and ability and grace to think for themselves because they're very much at the social, like, what do my friends think, right? What does, they're in this I don't want to say hive mentality because that sounds too cynical, but it's very difficult for them to go off on their own and to form their own opinions apart from the culture that they're imbibing or their friends. So, and I try to, that the Catholic Church is about, I mean, the best traditions, with Aquinas or Augustine is like thinking through things, thinking through reality. And I think a lot of them like, oh no, the Catholic Church just tells you what to believe. It's just about following the rules. So yeah, there's so many different dynamics going on if you, even within one class, if you're really attuned to it. I mean, there's just so many different levels going on and it's really exciting, but it's also, it makes me grateful that I'm not 15 or 16 anymore. So
No, that's really, I think there's a deep insight there. I'd like to share a moment from one of my experiences in one of my ministries, kind of similar to what you said about taking the short form content but not really going deeper into it. I remember one day there was a young lady and this person told me, they said, "Oh, hey, Manny, I'm really excited about the news." And I was wondering, I'm like, "What news are we talking about?" And she said, well, Pope Francis just allowed for gay people to get married now. And I thought to myself, I said, okay. And I asked her some questions. I was just like, well, what are your thoughts about this? She said, well, like, I'm really happy because now, it makes me want to go back to church. And I sat there for a good while and I thought to myself, I'm like, I don't know how to deal with this in the moment because this sounds like someone who just read something on TikTok, who just read a quick headline, didn't do the deep research, didn't read the documents, didn't do anything and doesn't know the full story. Let's put it that way. Um, and I thought to myself, like, I don't know how to respond in this moment. So I mean, I don't know if you're dealing with similar challenges or not, but that thought when you were speaking, it came to me. It was like, yeah, we live in a world, like you were saying, where we have so many different ideas, so many different things circulating, but how deep are we really going into them? And that's I would bear to guess probably low on the exploration analysis side of things, unfortunately. But thank you for that. That was helpful to hear. Nick, how about you? What are some of those challenges you've been encountering?
Well, I mean, I definitely am in a very unique situation. I mean, one, just being one of the few guy teachers there, I try to at least keep somewhat a distance from the girls' personal life. But or at least they're not going to be as open about it, I feel like. But also at my school, historically been, one of the more academically driven high schools in the area. I mean, it's not as much today just because you can't have as high expectations, but definitely it still tracks those students. So, want to get the straight A's, want to get into the best high school or colleges. I mean, the amount of them applying to Ivy schools, I'm like, have fun. I applied to one public school or one state school. That was it. But so for that, a lot of them deal with anxiety and just stressing out to a degree. I'm just like, is this normal? Because I don't remember stressing out this much even in college. I mean, we have 2 full-time counselors dealing with all the girls. I mean, I've had some students that had to take mental health breaks for like over 2 weeks just to get things on track that I'm just like, I mean, obviously it's just something that I never encountered. I mean, maybe just going to an all-guys school is just completely different, but they'll just, stress out everything. They'll just see girls, in the middle of class just start needing to leave the room to go see a counselor or just start crying in the middle of it. I'm just like, you okay? Do you want to go see the counselor? And, just getting, or, they'll stress out just because they have one too many assignments that we have to like clarify things with the counselor because they all just want to get perfect grade, perfect done, getting it done on timing. And then, there's just some students that they have no motivation to do anything that, even getting them to do the simplest assignments, like it's there. It's been posted for a week. That is just totally different ballpark than I remember doing it. It's not like they're freaking out or, it's not like they're talking about things, in the news or anything. They're all, just my own situation. They're all just stressing out over, whether it's their extracurricular stuff, their job, or just getting the grades turned in. That it's just not a healthy environment. And then so many of them will just try to block it out, like you said, living off their phones or their laptops, since that's how they do all their work. I mean, just completely different than how I had it. We had our laptops to write a paper. Now, they're using it like we did in college, just constantly doing everything on their laptops or being on their phone nonstop, which, sometimes they're on the laptops and they're just looking up other things that have nothing to do with class. My biggest issue is, well, it's religion class. I don't have to try as hard. I'll do my math homework. And you're like, okay, it's important. I get that. I get you want to get the right assignment on it, but this is important too. And there's other things in school than just getting the right straight A's or getting, your homework done on time. That I think they're just bombarded with so many things that just stress out way too easily. That, yeah, that's just something I've been recognizing throughout this past year and, still coming to terms with how to best help with it. I mean, luckily I'm not teaching too many classes. I hear from other people in my department that have to teach. We just had a discussion in my last department meeting about needing help for those difficult conversations, especially because the sophomores are just not getting into theology of the body. And, of course, all the stuff in morality that they teach junior year, especially with, it's all girls, so dealing with things like abortional stuff like that is a lot more touchy than, would have been for, me going to an all guys school. That it's just stuff that, there's no easy way to win any of it. I'm not, it's the best part I can think of, but to deal with it, there's just, it's a lot more stress out, a lot more anxiety, constantly needing, mental health stuff. I think is the biggest thing they're all dealing with.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there seems to be this growing struggle I've noticed in the news of especially on college campuses that young adults are just really really struggling at times with issues of mental health. Like St. Louis University just recently had like a mental health day because in the past I know there have been concerns about unfortunately students taking their own lives or taking drastic measures essentially to try to deal with the stresses and the anxieties they've been dealing with. And it's tough because I don't know how aware we are, unless you're in the field like you are. I don't know how aware we are that this is happening early on, even in high school. That this is going on in the earliest phases, which is um, scary, because it's kind of like you see the root of the problem kind of forming already. and it's only going to grow worse, I would imagine, once you hit higher education. And I don't see an easy way to tackle that problem. Like you said, school isn't all about A's, but at the same time, I'm guessing if you're a young lady at your school who um, has parents that are pressuring them to do super well all the time, you're
I mean, I don't
dealing
even know
with
if
two
it's the
people
parents.
every
Sometimes I
hour.
think it's just they do it to themselves. I mean, they freaked out over having A minus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I was
I
just like,
that
I'd be happy to have an A minus when I was your age.
hmm No, that's tough. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad you're working and ministering to them as best as you can, but that one, mental health is such a challenging, interesting topic I think we're wrestling with in our world today, and um, I'm kind of glad you're getting that exposure to it in your ministry, the difficulties with it, but at the same time, I mean, I don't think there's, like you said, I don't think there's easy answers to this kind of stuff, unfortunately, which is very tough to deal with. Josh, how about you? What are some of the difficulties you're encountering at St. Thomas More?
Yeah, there are a number of difficulties, but I guess I'll hit on a few. So I guess in regards to like mental health, something I've noticed among the students is like every student wants to have friends and friend groups, and they want to socialize and belong. That's one of the biggest things we talk about at our university is like basically building a culture of belonging for students. Um, just because it keeps students in college, it makes their experience better. It's just better for their human formation in general. Um, and so I think, but also there seems to be like students don't want to go to like events. They have like a reticence to do like group if activities, and they only want to go if they know certain people are going to be there. And so it's like they have this desire for friendships, without maybe being in the potentially awkward or difficult situations of building new friendships. They kind of want it to be more casual. Maybe you're just hanging out with a small group of people that you're already familiar with and building like community there. And just as an example, to illustrate this, I've had an awesome opportunity this semester. I'm sitting in on a theology class. Um, we were doing an activity where the professor wanted us to stand up and go around the room and like get into like groups of three and like talk about something. And I was standing with a student and another student. She's approaching us, and I was standing in the aisle and I thought she might be trying to like get by me. So I just scooted over and she like stopped in front of me and I said, "Oh, do you want to join? Are you joining like our group?" And like her reaction was, she's like, "Oh, do you want me to be here?" Like she seemed like me asking her, like, are you trying to join our group was like me telling her we didn't want her. And like she just wanted to be like wanted. She wanted to know that like, yeah, we want you to be in our group. And that just caught me off guard because for me I thought it was just a very casual like, yeah, you just walk up to someone and be like, let's get in this group. um but I think there's just so much social anxiety, especially around people that you don't know, that these students don't know. Yeah, that's one thing. I guess another thing also that I've noticed, kind of like Evan was talking about, maybe TikTok or social media influencers and the the perennial ear pod that's just always in the ear of students, or AirPod, I don't even know what they're called. Um, but I think I've noticed, I mentioned earlier about like marriage and family life, and because I mean the vast majority of these students are will be dating, and will probably get married. So I find myself really trying to like promote a healthy understanding of marriage, and particularly like relationships between men and women, especially for the men at the university. Because I just know that there are so many voices, especially on social media, and like they're going to be getting their idea of what it is to be a man, eventually a boyfriend, a husband, a father from somewhere. And I want it to be somewhere that's healthy, um, because it's very easy to find someone on social media who's promoting different ideas that probably don't align with Catholic understanding of masculinity. And um, but yeah, so trying to help these young men, because I can see in general there's like, I think there's a gap maybe between a lot of times between the maturity level of the women and the men at the university, um, which in general I think happens in most places. Women mature faster, but yeah. So those are, I guess, two main challenges.
Yeah, the loneliness thing is fascinating because when I go on Instagram or I like seeing videos on social media and things, the amount of like meme videos, let's call them, or like, joking videos about like, oh, young adults today, we're so lonely, like we're gonna die single and alone, or like all these things. And um in some ways you watch them at the beginning and you're like, ha ha ha, this is really funny, there's humor to this. But then you dig deeper and you're like, wow, this is like really crushing and really sad. I've been working since January as a chaplain at a hospital here in St. Louis. And one of the things I've come to realize is like, wow, like when you are completely alone, when you have no family left, no partner, nothing in your life, and life starts to take a turn, it becomes really, really difficult. Um, so I think, I'm hopeful that your ministry, the work you're doing is hopefully helping to promote that sense of unity with people. But it's like, it's become such a problem. And I'm wondering too, to what extent like COVID and the pandemic and the shutdowns, like how much that posed an extra problem for young people to learn to relate again and to learn to kind of get back into those social settings. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have specific answers to that, but it's just a curiosity I have because, like you were saying, like some people were able to mature, right, and grow out of that experience, but there seem to be others that are still stagnant or still struggling to make the adjustment or make the changes necessary to grow in their social life, which that's tough. That's I don't yeah, I wish there was an easy answer for that one as well. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be, but um you're
Man,
making the
can I
steps,
jump
Josh.
on? Can I connect?
Please go ahead, Evan.
Josh mentioned, the belonging, and it made me tie in authenticity, which I think the kids I'm
Mm.
teaching, the 15-year-olds, are so right. They sniff out hypocrisy, or falsity, but they also want to belong so bad at the same time. So there's this really, I think, potentially fruitful tension that, they're trying to harmonize between community and authenticity. How do I be myself within community? Because the danger, if you want to be too much a part of a community, you start to mold yourself according to the whims and desires of a group. I have one kid who comes to mind who alone, he's a really good kid, super insightful, super reflective, but you put him in this classroom with kids he's trying to impress, and it's a completely different story. So
Mm.
it just made me, when Josh is saying, that girl, like, oh, do you want me, like, there's such this God-given desire to want to be in communion, but we need to do it at the same time, like being ourselves, being the person who God called me to be, and not trying to conform in a way where we have to give up some essential aspect of who we are. And that's with school, with work, but in relationships, right? I mean, I'm sure there's dozens of stories about, you try to be who you think the other person wants you to be in order to achieve this goal or this good, right? So, and going back to Josh's, I think masculinity is such a huge issue, because they're getting so much conflicting ideas of what it means to be a man. And I think especially in El Paso, there's definitely this machismo aspect, right? So there's a certain rigid idea of, okay, to be a man means to do this or that, as opposed to, well, yes and no.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And Nick, I think kind of what Evan was saying about that kind of the group identity almost. Excuse me. Um we had talked about this before, but like being in the Archdiocese here in St. Louis, um, it's interesting how even for young adults, there can be a struggle sometimes to find like a community or a group that you can identify with because each group kind of has their own identity of what like they're prioritizing or what they're focusing on, right? And I don't know, we kind of talked about this before, but sometimes it can be almost difficult to even find a connection, right? Or like find somebody you can relate with.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would say these days, since everything's, at least, outside of school setting, everything's going to be online, that it can be hard to meet other people if no one's going to take that charge and do it. I think a lot of it is, especially if you're younger people, they don't want to have to be that person that goes forth and does it. That, yeah, it can be difficult just to even meet other people that isn't through video games, and Discord, or just social media, but actually going out, being physically present for someone to truly, that's how you truly get to know someone, is being in there. I mean, it's one thing I see with my students is like, they have a very good sense of community for the most part at the school, but it's like, you're going to have to actually try next year, which for a lot of them might be really difficult, which is, why you do see so many freshman college students leave, because it's hard to take that initiative and recognize that you actually have to put some effort into it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Josh, you had mentioned that your campus ministry team, you guys are kind of noticing this issue, and I'm sure wrestling with it and dealing with it. Like, what are some strategies y'all have tried, or what are some ideas or takeaways you've been kind of dealing or trying to use to kind of deal with this problem, or attack this problem as best as you can?
Yeah, so this is something that, like, we've noticed across the university in basically all the different departments is um almost like an unwillingness to engage. It's like very difficult to get students to engage. Um, and so something that we do in our department, as I mentioned, like most things are student led. And so we basically um so I've only been there for 9 months, but the director of campus ministry who I work under, he's been working for I think 8 years here in campus ministry. And so he said, just from his experience, um you can't just impose something on the students, because if they're not interested, if it's not something, even if it's something good, like it could be, I don't know, like a Bible study, you want to do a Bible study. If it's not like a student's idea, and if the students aren't, if it's not like from their motivation, it's just not going to happen. They're not going to be bought in. They're not going to participate. And so really what a lot of it is leaning on ideas. And sometimes you have to like pull those ideas out of students and find that like that's something that they're passionate about, and something that, because a student invitation is going to work way better than me inviting someone, frankly, like to come to some event or something. It's going to be a student who makes a relationship with another student in the dorms, in the classroom, in a club, in a sport, and invites them and says, hey, this thing is really cool, and like I want you to come. That's kind of the bulk of ministry, and how like we try to get people involved. And I think also there's a temptation to think of like the success of our ministry in terms of like how many people attend our things. And there is like there's a quantitative measure that you can measure to measure success, but it's also just very difficult with, ministry and, eternal souls. And if ultimately like what we're trying to convey is like conformity to Christ, and like um ultimately salvation. So it's like you can't really measure that. But yeah.
No. Oh man. No, and that I think that one-on-one it ties in with what Evan and Nick were kind of saying earlier of we're looking I think the reason that is so effective is because once I know someone, once I have that relationship, I know they're authentic. And like I know that they wouldn't lead me down a bad path, right? So like if they're inviting me to some Bible study, if I don't know anyone, this could be a crapshoot of like this is either going to be really great or really awful. But if my friend is inviting me to come or like insisting we go, there's a different dynamic there. There's something happening there that's saying, okay, if this person is telling me I should go, I can trust them. And like I think building on that trust is very, very powerful. And also, I mean, what I found funny hearing you say that was you were coming from an environment which is really unique because before here, I know you were a big participant over at the Catholic Study Center at St. Louis University. And there, I think they have a really healthy dynamic of both working, of the personal invitation working really well, but also a lot of people just gravitate towards them naturally. But you're kind of dealing with a new facet of life where you really need that personal invitation to be dependent on, getting people to join the ministry and buy into the program that y'all have set up for the students, which is, yeah, it's interesting that you had to make that transition, I think. Um, we're getting close to the end of our time, but I want to ask you guys, in y'all's experience so far, um, where do you think you can see opportunities for young adults, for ministers, for, in your case, educators? Where do you see that we can do more to better serve our young people, to better serve those that we're working with in our ministries? But more specifically for the age demographics you're working with, which would be like high school and young adult people. Evan, if you want to start us off.
Sure. So I think two things immediately come to mind, which I think all three of us have talked about and probably experienced. So I think one, at this age, I think like Josh said, it's not necessarily about abstract ideas or trying to impose something externally. So the way I structure my class, both for my sanity and my students, is, I'll teach for maybe 20 minutes out of a 50-minute period. Yeah, 20 to 30. But that last, chunk of class is for them to work on the assignment I gave them. So one, it's okay, give them time to work on it, but also that's a time where they talk to each other, because that's really what keeps most of them just engaged and going, is like they want to talk to their friends, they want to cultivate inside jokes, they want to talk about what happened at lunch or etc. So I think, and this goes to what Josh was saying, it's about offering space for encounter for each other. And again, that depending on your demographic. So I teach at I only have 100 kids in my sophomore class. A lot of them know each other. A lot of them grew up with each other. So I think there's already that inbuilt sense of familiarity and community. But the way they incorporate other kids that they don't know is very impressive. And it might be, a cultural thing too. I think part of the El Paso charm is that it's very welcoming. It's a very hospitable place if you're from the outside. So I think the first thing is, yeah, just is setting up these spaces for encounter, but then kind of letting them be, right? Letting them be awkward, letting them make jokes. And because that's really what I've observed is the life-giving aspect of, school. They're going to learn, they have to do a certain part, but at their age, most of them are not driven by like, I want to know this, right? That's going to come with college or grad school. So I think that space for encounter. I think secondly, and I think Pope Francis has been really good about this. I think it's just so complicated, but is coming to terms with the technological world, that it's here, that kids are being raised on on all sorts of media. And again, there's no easy answer, but how do we make that a healthy medium? How do we make that a medium where, it's not a replacement for encounter, and it's a place that can cultivate, community and exchange of ideas without delving into the common denominator of gossip and slander and just kind of empty entertainment, like the modern equivalent of bread and circuses. So yeah, I think cultivating that space of encounter for young people, whatever that means practically, but also coming to terms with technology. In a hopeful and also, I guess, critical way, which I think Francis has been really good with. So those are the two things that come to mind for me.
Yeah, thank you. Before we go to Nick, just one funny thought I had. I think it would make a great ministerial tattoo to put "Be okay with the awkward." I don't think we're comfortable in the awkward, but we got it. We got to learn that that's a part of the process as well. I think that was a beautiful insight to hear from you. Yeah, thank
Really
you.
agree.
Nick, go ahead.
Well, that kind of brought to mind is, we did Ignatian discernment at the start of the year. Two assignments we had them do was, so you're actually going to have to pray and reflect for an entire week. And a lot of them, were just like, what? But then so many of their reflections are like, wow, I never actually had to put any effort into praying before. And a lot of them got something out of it. And I think just kind of the point that a lot of them don't have this encounter yet. A lot of them have put effort into it, but those that did were actually able to get something out of it. And I think that's something that just has to be encouraged, actually learning how to pray, learning to have relationship with Christ, I think too many times our, theology class can just be all about, here's all you need to know to get such and such sacrament, or, you know, to pass the class. But a lot of it should be actually cultivating, an encounter with Christ, a relationship with Christ, and how it is that we go about and share that relationship with ourselves and others. How do we actually live that out? So I think, there's so many rooms for potential, but just putting actually that effort into teaching how to pray, Lord, teach us how to pray. What truly is the love of Christ? How do we truly live that out? How do I have that relationship with him and others? It's just something that has to be cultivated. And when it is, a lot of them do get something out of it. I mean, I had some, they did the assignment, they're like, I think I'm gonna go back to youth group after this. Just like, awesome.
Yeah, it's almost like what I hear is you guys are sort of trying to almost give them the tools and then allow them to run with it as they need it in their lives, right? So like spirituality, where are you going to gravitate towards? What are you going to do? Um, I think that kind of empowers a lot of young people too, to enter into that ministry and or not into the ministry, but into their faith life and really dig deeper into their relationship with God at the end of the day. So that's awesome. Very cool. Josh, how about you?
Yeah, so I would say two things of really what stuff we've touched on, but the first is I'm amazed at how much different the culture is for college students than me, who was their age just a few years ago. Part of that could just be like my particular upbringing or what, but there's definitely a cultural like gap. And so I think something that's so important is, as we mentioned, is authenticity, and somehow balancing relatability and authenticity of how I can be relatable to them and like understand different facets of their culture and like how they operate, while also not trying to be like their peer, while remaining having like a professional boundary I guess, of being like, no, I'm not another college student. Um, I am like a staff at this university, but I understand things and like not incorporate it in a way that would just come off as inauthentic. If I'm trying to be like them, like, because that's not who I am. And like Evans mentioned, they don't want that. They don't want that. And then the second one, I guess, would be kind of the difficulty about like of what Nick was talking about was I have such a passion for, I guess, catechesis and then also theology, of kind of, you've accepted the faith and you want to understand it more, but recognizing that most of the students at my university, regardless of their background, aren't at that stage. Like they might just need to have basic human encounters in order to even be like interested in a religious encounter. Not that one has to come first or second, but like the importance of like building relationships at the base in order for them to, because I don't know if just like in general the level of like knowledge of the faith, I just don't think in general it's there for most people, to then want to understand it more. Like they need to know it first, but then also like I feel like there's like a certain baseline before you even need to venture into knowing the faith. Because I mean, some of the students on campus have no religious background at all, zero. They've never set foot in a church. They've never done any formal religion, and so it's just that's a challenge, and it's something to grow in. Because part of me just wants to be like, no, I don't want. Sorry, sorry.
You're okay.
But did you hear that ringing or no?
I heard a little
Was that
tap, but it wasn't anything
okay?
serious.
Anyway, but like because I have such a passion for like handing on the faith, it's like that's what I want to do. But sometimes also it's like you have to do that in could be more subtle ways or not as direct, I guess.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from all of you today, I think, is like there has been a lot of work of discernment in terms of not just personal self-discernment, but a lot of trying to discern the community and discern how whatever the needs are of the community, how is God asking me to respond to those needs accordingly? And I think what's fascinating in this conversation alone is you see how varied, how there's similar strokes happening here, but there's a variety of concerns or um situations that are uniquely affecting your ministries, which I think really reflects like the breadth and body of the church in so many ways of like we are in so many different regions, so many cultures, so many countries across the world. And our concerns here may not be the same concerns as people in Morocco or people in Chile or like people in Mozambique or it's it's unique how in the church we have similar concerns, but they're uniquely our own too. And I think for all of you, you are really relying on the Spirit to learn how to respond and to try to follow that calling, which I want to give you guys props for that. That's incredible. It's a really beautiful um thing to witness, I think, from members in the church who are trying to minister and just trying to bring Jesus Christ to others. Um, Before we conclude today, I do want to give you guys a chance to shout out if there's any schools or anything you want to promote or anything like that. Before we do that, I want to share a prayer I found online. I believe this was from Marquette University. It was titled A Prayer for Educators, Parents, and Students. And I'd like all of y'all to join me as we pray for our educators, parents, and students across the church and across the world. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. All holy, loving, and compassionate God, we thank you for your loving care of all creation and your protection and guidance over all. We come to you today with all the faith and trust we can muster in this time. Please come to our aid. We bring the administrators, principals, professors, teachers, school secretaries, the support staff, and the maintenance staff of our schools and universities before you. In their vocations as educators, they continue the teaching ministry of Christ. We pray for your blessings over their lives, their work, their livelihood, and their families. Guide them with your wisdom. May they be empowered by your Spirit to see the needs of their students and to inspire those under their care. We bring our parents, guardians, and caregivers of our students before you. They are faced with unprecedented challenges. They have to make decisions that require your wisdom, understanding, and insight. When they feel overwhelmed, be present in their lives. May they never feel alone or abandoned. Strengthen them from within so that they might be a source of strength, confidence, and hope for their children. Most of all, we bring before you our students who will either be educated online, at home, or in person in our schools. As they pursue their education in the midst of this time, enlighten their minds. May they grow in grace and wisdom. In areas where there is a lack, provide them knowledge, understanding, counsel, and fortitude. Keep them safe from all illnesses and protect them from all harm. We ask all these things through the intercession of our Blessed Mother Mary and through Christ our teacher. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right. Before we go, gentlemen, again, if you guys want to, if there's anything you want to shout out from your schools, or if you guys have any social media or anything that people could follow, feel free to share. Um, or if you want to promote your schools in any way, anything they're doing, feel free to share.
Well, as a teacher, I've realized it's very helpful not to have social media because that's the first thing that the kids will look up. Yeah, so Cathedral High School El Paso, always looking for new young Lasallian gentlemen, but also, of course, Aquinas Institute of Theology in St. Louis, which brought us all together. And also, if ever any of my high school teachers are listening to this, that I apologize. So glad to be here. All you guys.
Thanks, Evan. Thank you.
Of course, shout out to Koryezu Academy here in St. Louis, but also to the Apostles of the Sacred Heart in their ministry. They're not that major in the United States. They're mostly just in Connecticut and New York, but also here in the St. Louis area. So definitely shout out to them because all the apostles are awesome. They would make the school 10 times better than what it was. They very much keep their charism in check, and all the students love them, which a lot of high schools no longer have that witness anymore. That having there has been such a great opportunity.
Yeah. Awesome. Hey, we love good charisms, that's for sure. Absolutely. Josh?
Guess I'll just shout out Thomas More University. It's a great place to work. We're hiring in different departments. And also just anywhere. I graduated from Thomas More, and so it's nice to see developments they've made, especially in the realm of ministry and also like implementing our mission as a Catholic university. And so it's just been really exciting to be a part of that. Shout
Yeah,
out
when
to
I
Manny
visited,
for bringing me on the
oh,
podcast.
thanks, Josh. Thank you. When I visited, I'm pretty sure, is it Thomas More that their baseball field is like right off the interstate? Like
Yeah, so
the
that was like a farm league professional team, and they still play there. But now Thomas More plays there as well, and so it's Thomas More
really
Stadium. Yeah, the Florence
nice.
Yalls is the like I don't even know
Yeah.
they're below single A. So
Yes. Oh my gosh. We could play then if we formed a team. We could get there maybe.
Well, we had a pretty good kickball team, or not
That's
kickball.
right. Our football team was legendary. That's true. Oh man. Well, thank you listeners for chiming in today and giving us some time to really reflect on some really powerful, deep themes. Again, if you guys have an opportunity, please share this episode, like, comment, and get the word out because really I think our Catholic educators are doing the Lord's work in so many different ways and really touching the lives of the young people they serve. Thank you guys and y'all take care, all right? Blessings, peace, bye bye.
So